Hi everyone, and welcome back to Philosophy of the Paranormal with me, Dr. Josh Redstone. So today is our last lecture of the semester, and of course it's the second of two of our special topics lectures. I know we've gone a little bit past the last day of class here, but the point of these lectures is to, again, as I said last time, kind of give you the tools to think about whatever topic you've chosen for your essay, the tools of naturalism, naturalistic principles that will be important to keep in mind as you're conducting your research and writing your essay. And of course, we're going to apply these principles to today's special topic. And today's special topic, I've entitled Strange Deja Vu. We'll be looking at whether strange anomalous phenomena like the Mandela Effect or Deja Vu are evidence for the claim that there are such alternate realities and alternate timelines, and perhaps that there is some crisscrossing of some kind going on between these realities or timelines. Now, I want to mention, of course, I am riffing again, because I'm trying to make this lecture short and digestible, because I know you are all in the thick of finishing up your work for this class and for other classes, so I'm going to really try to keep this one shorter than last time. But do take notes, because I'm riffing a lot, and keep also in mind all of the principles of naturalism that I discussed last time. Principles like cause and effect, methodology like skepticism, scientific skepticism, or methodological skepticism. What kind of evidence are we dealing with when it comes to these claims? Do any of these claims violate the principle of parsimony? Can any of these claims be used to derive hypotheses which we can then test scientifically? So, are any of these claims in principle falsifiable? Keep scientific pragmatism in mind. Again, remember, don't throw your appreciation and reliance on science away just because a possibly pseudoscientific explanation sounds compelling, right? Ideas of alternate timelines and multiverses are very compelling indeed. But even in physics, even in the strangest realms of quantum physics, these explanations are there are just one interpretation among many of quantum mechanics. I'm talking about things like the many worlds interpretation here. And remember also to keep in mind the limits of belief and knowledge, and that we are after knowledge here, right? And it's fun to speculate, but we are after knowledge. And, true belief is fine, as I talked about toward the end of the last lecture, but as philosophers and scientists, what we really want is knowledge. So, can we know any of the things we're going to talk about today? Well, let's see. Now, I'm not qualified to really say too much about the possibilities of other universes or timelines, right? Because I am not a physicist. It is true that there are interpretations of quantum mechanics that feature multiple realities. So, for example, if you think about quantum physics, there's one interpretation of quantum mechanics called the many worlds interpretation. So if you think back to some of my previous lectures when I talked briefly about the double slit experiment and Schrodinger's cat, let's take the double slit experiment because it's simpler. We're firing photons towards this double slit, right? Now, if we don't observe this process, we get an interference pattern that looks like a wave. So when these particles are unobserved, they behave like waves. But if we observe them while we're doing this, for some reason, we get a different kind of interference pattern. We don't get a waveform interference pattern. We get just two kinds of splotches on the back of our sensor where the photon goes through one or the other slit. So when it's unobserved, it's like the light is a wave going through both slits. But when we observe this process, the photon has to choose one slit or the other. So when it's observed, the photon, the particle, behaves like a particle. Light behaves like a particle when we observe it, behaves like a wave when we don't observe it, in the double slit experiment. Now, think to when this is being observed. The explanation here is that observation, or some kind of intervention, usually in New Age or pseudoscientific discussions, it's the power of consciousness that causes this, but that is not certain by any means in quantum mechanics. And this is only one interpretation of quantum mechanics, by the way. But basically, the theory goes that if we observe the process, these photons going through, they behave like particles, and the photon has to go through one or the other. And that active observation collapses the wave function, which is like the space of possibilities for our photon being fired through these slits. So we might observe this and see it going through the right-hand slit. But it's also possible that it could have gone through the left-hand slit. And one interpretation, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, says that the wave function collapse is not just one possibility happening and the others not happening. All possibilities happen, according to the many worlds interpretation, but they happen in a different universe. So if I'm doing the double slit experiment and I observe, I shoot my photon and it goes through the right slit, well, as soon as I observe and collapse that wave function, according to the many worlds interpretation, another universe branches off where that particle has gone through the left slit instead of the right. So that is basically a very, very basic sort of introduction, I guess. Not a proper introduction, but a basic summary of the many worlds interpretations. Basically, you can sum it up by saying that all possibilities that can happen do happen, but they don't all happen in this universe. Other possibilities that don't happen here happen in other universes. That's the idea. That's the many worlds interpretation. Now, I'm not qualified to talk about that in any great depth, of course, because I'm not a physicist, right? I'm a philosopher and I'm a cognitive scientist. But what I am qualified to talk about is science fiction. And I'm sure most of you will be aware that time travel features heavily in science fiction, as does the possibility of alternate realities. I'm thinking here of like the Star Trek franchise, right? In Star Trek, there's actually a mirror universe. For some reason, a lot of people in the mirror universe are evil and have mustaches or beards to signify their evilness. It's funny, as I was doing the prep work for some of this, I was actually watching some old episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, and I was struck by one. The title of the episode is Cause and Effect, where Captain Picard and the Enterprise get stuck in this temporal loop where the Enterprise is continuously destroyed at the end of the loop, and then the loop resets. And the crew members begin experiencing deja vu because they have actually been repeating these events over and over in this temporal loop. And the challenge they face in the episode is figuring out how to get a message back in time to the beginning of the loop such that they can break the loop. It's quite an interesting episode if you're into 90s Star Trek like I am. I encourage you all to watch it. Another great episode I was just watching is called Parallels, where Commander Worf, the Klingon security officer of the Star Trek Enterprise, I know I'm showing you how much of a nerd I am right now, but Commander Worf is flying through space. He goes through some kind of temporal anomaly or quantum anomaly, some kind of space-time anomaly, right? It's always an anomaly in Star Trek. So anyway, for some reason, this anomaly causes Worf to start jumping between different quantum realities. In the same sense, like quantum realities in the sense of the many worlds interpretation. And Worf remembers things wrong each time he makes a jump, because of course the new universe he finds himself in is different from the one he remembers. And at first he thinks he's just misremembering things, but eventually he realizes that he's jumping through different universes, and he needs to enlist the help of one of the alternate universe crews of the Enterprise to help him get back to his reality. So, lots of fun stuff like that in Star Trek. It's great. I mean, the idea of alternate realities, of course, features very heavily in the animated sitcom Rick and Morty. And if you have not seen that, I highly recommend it. It is a very good adult animated sitcom satire kind of show, which features Rick, who is an alcoholic genius scientist, and he takes his grandchildren on interdimensional adventures that quite often prove to be psychologically scarring. Very funny show, very humorous. Do check out Rick and Morty if you'd like some funny stories to do with, interdimensional travel, if you like. The Netflix series Dark, that's another one. These are just examples that I'm recently familiar with. Of course, there are, very old stories about time travel, all the way back to The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, or the story of Tauro Urashima, Japanese story that's 300 years old, I think. It's quite an old story, one of the first time travel stories. Lots of different stories about time travel, but Netflix's series Dark is a really interesting story featuring time travel and alternate futures, and the theme of determinism is very present in this show. Very, very interesting. So, these are just some examples that you may be familiar with. Of course, I guess there's also Doctor Who, right? The Doctor is a Time Lord, right? So there's time travel all over the place in science fiction. Alternate realities all over the place. So even if you're not familiar with the quantum mechanics side of things, at least conceptually, you should have some idea of what we mean when we talk about alternate realities or alternate timelines. Now, two of the anomalous phenomena that were suggested most frequently for the special topics when it came to this alternate timeline stuff, were Deja Vu and the Mandela Effect. And these are sometimes taken in online discussion, for example, on, different forums. Reddit, for example, is where I think the Mandela Effect really entered the zeitgeist, really. Anyway, Deja Vu and the Mandela Effect are often used in these circles, as perhaps an interesting line of evidence that suggests that travel between alternate realities or information leakage from alternate realities or from the past or the future is somehow possible, which is compelling. And, the reason I mentioned those particular episodes of Star Trek before were because these are very much what happens in those episodes. So it's something that seems plausible and is plausibly executed in science fiction, but is it really evidence for this? Just in case you're not familiar, Deja Vu is, we should all be familiar with Deja Vu. Deja Vu is French for already seen. Deja Vu refers to the sense that you have seen or experienced something before, even though you haven't. And you've probably all experienced a moment of deja vu at least once in your lives. I suppose this is sometimes used as evidence, in paranormal circles for precognition, but on Reddit, for example, it is also used as possible evidence for, the possibility of information leakage from the past or the future, right? So, is that plausible? I don't know. Just in case you're not familiar, Deja Vu is, we should all be familiar with Deja Vu. Deja Vu is French for already seen. Deja Vu refers to the sense that you have seen or experienced something before, even though you haven't. And you've probably all experienced a moment of deja vu at least once in your lives. I suppose this is sometimes used as evidence, in paranormal circles for precognition, but on Reddit, for example, it is also used as possible evidence for, the possibility of information leakage from the past or the future, right? So, is that plausible? I don't know. The Mandela Effect is the more interesting one, to my mind. It was actually identified and given a name by a paranormal researcher named Fiona Broom. Now, she had the false memory of having watched the funeral of Nelson Mandela, who was later to become the president of South Africa. She believed that she had watched the funeral of Nelson Mandela on television in the 1980s. And she claims that perhaps up to thousands of other people remembered the same thing. So this was a false memory, potentially a collective false memory. Of course, Mandela, we know, did not die in the 80s. Bloom remembered him having died in prison. Of course, after the apartheid regime in South Africa ended, Mandela got out of prison and ran for president, and he was president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999, and he only died in 2013. So Bloom could not have seen his funeral on television. Bloom could not have known that he had died in prison because, of course, he did not die in prison. So that's the Mandela Effect. It's named after Nelson Mandela. This one is a little rarer than Deja Vu. I find that when I speak to people, they do not, or not as many people report having experienced this sort of thing before. But there are a couple of interesting examples that I will mention now, just in case you might have one of these false memories yourself. One that comes up a lot, including in some of your essay proposals, for those of you who wanted to write about the Mandela Effect, is the spelling of Berenstein bears. Of course, the Berenstein bears are not pronounced the way many of us pronounce the word. You know, Berenstein bears are characters from children's books, if you're not familiar with them. Many people pronounce it Berenstein, but it's actually Berenstein, and it's spelled Berenstain. Many people falsely remember that it's spelled Berenstein, Berenstein Bears, but it's not spelled that way. But many people falsely recollect that that is how it was spelled. And I guess the idea here is that maybe it was spelled this way in the previous reality or timeline, but perhaps you've switched realities where it's the Berenstain Bears instead of the Berenstein Bears. This is the you know, I guess alternate reality interpretation of the Mandela Effect, right? Another one that I really like is Luke, I am your father. Guys seen Star Wars, right? Empire Strikes Back. Spoiler alert, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, and he reveals, you know, by saying, Luke, I am your father. Or does he? This is the way the quote is often given, you know, Luke, I am your father, when people are quoting the movie. But Darth Vader never says that in The Empire Strikes Back. Luke says, when Vader is questioning him about his father, Luke says that Obi-Wan explained to him. He says to Darth Vader, he told me you killed him, in reference to Luke's father. Darth Vader replies by saying, no, I am your father. So he never says, Luke, I am your father. He says, no, I am your father. So that's another example. My favorite example, and this is the one that I actually experienced when I was grading a paper on the Mandela Effect, was the one to do with a movie called Shazam, starring Sinbad, where Sinbad plays a genie. This movie does not exist. And I was reading this paper, and the student was describing this movie, the movie Shazam, where Sinbad plays a genie, and he answers wishes, and so on and so forth. And I thought, yeah, I remember that movie trailer. That was a 90s movie trailer. I definitely remember that. And my student went on to explain, well, no, actually, there was no such movie. There was a movie starring Shaquille O'Neal, who played a genie, called Kazam, which came out in 1996 and did not really perform that well at the box office. But I remembered Shazam, not Kazam. And I had to actually look into it, go to Wikipedia and IMDb and find out which movie was real and which wasn't. I'm one of these folks that had falsely remembered a movie from the 90s starring Sinbad called Shazam. There's no such movie. So that's the Mandela Effect. Very strange. Very strange. If you have an interesting example of Deja Vu or the Mandela Effect, let me know in the comments. Now, remember, I'm playing fast and loose with my characterization of these phenomena and with the sort of paranormal or sci-fi side of things. Is it true, or could it be possible that Deja Vu represents the possibility of information leakage between different points in time? Or is it a possibility that the Mandela Effect is evidence of somehow being able to unknowingly switch realities or timelines, or have information leakage between different realities or timelines? Is that possible? Well, I'm not going to say anything's impossible here. Remember, I'm not trying to tell anyone what to believe, and the many worlds interpretation is one of many interpretations of quantum mechanics. So I don't think we should just categorically rule it out. But we do have to go over the principles of naturalism. Keep those in mind when we are, asking how plausible these explanations for these phenomena are. And I realize right off the bat, you may be noticing that's kind of circular, and you'd be right. Circular, I mean, in the sense that the Mandela Effect or Deja Vu might be used as evidence for alternate realities or timelines. But the idea of alternate realities or alternate timelines is also used as an explanation for Deja Vu and the Mandela Effect. So right off the bat, this is a little pseudoscientific because it's a circular argument, right? But bracketing that, is it plausible? Is some kind of alternate timeline or alternate reality information leakage a plausible explanation of the Mandela Effect or Deja Vu or something? Well, we have to look at the principles of naturalism. Like, one principle is, of course, cause and effect, and this seems to be violated by both explanations here, both the explanation of Deja Vu and of the Mandela Effect as excuse me. The idea that Deja Vu or the Mandela Effect could be caused by some kind of leakage or transference from another timeline or another reality would certainly seem to violate the principle of cause and effect. And do we have reasons to doubt these claims? Should we be skeptical? Of course we should. Yes, these ideas are compelling and fun, and they make for great science fiction, but is there anything that we ought to doubt about them? Well, one thing that I can think of right off the bat is that the many worlds interpretation, while it is one of many interpretations of quantum mechanics, it's one of like 17 or something like that. 17 different ways to interpret quantum mechanics. And we don't really have the means to experiment and rule out which is the correct one. They all work as well as the other, and there's no way to experimentally rule out one or the other. So that should give us pause. That should give us reason to doubt these claims. What kind of evidence is used to support these claims? Well, often it's anecdotal, really. A claim of deja vu or of the Mandela Effect, a person might insist, because their experience of deja vu is so strong that they must have lived this event before, or that their false memory is so strong that it must be a real memory, but maybe from another universe. Maybe my memory of the trailer for Shazam is so strong that I just can't believe the movie was never made. It must have been made, but in an alternate reality, that perhaps I came from that reality to this one, right? But remember, ultimately, that's just anecdote. And as I talked about last time, we need to treat anecdote very skeptically. Parsimony is big here, especially when it comes to the quantum mechanical side of things. Are there explanations with fewer unwarranted assumptions than, say, alternate realities and alternate timelines? Yes, there are. And I'm not going to get into them in too much detail, but I am going to point you in the direction of some. Falsifiability. Do these claims allow us to generate empirically testable hypotheses? Not really. How could we do it? We cannot use empirical experimentation currently to rule out which interpretations of quantum mechanics are correct and which are not. So how could we test a claim like this? We just couldn't do it. Scientific pragmatism and knowledge versus belief. I won't go into too much detail here, but just remember, as I said last time and as I said earlier in this lecture, what we're after is knowledge. And it's fine to believe in this or that interpretation of quantum mechanics, but we are after knowledge, not mere belief. And don't throw your scientific pragmatism out the window just because the possibility of alternate timelines or multiple realities sounds cool, right? If anything, the multiverse theory is the least parsimonious explanation I can think of, and parsimony being an important symbol of an important part of naturalism and science means we can't just discard it. We can't just discard that principle if we want. So, I mean, really, when you're applying these principles, what you're doing is asking whether there is a plausible explanation, plausible natural explanation for things like deja vu or the Mandela Effect, and there are. When it comes to deja vu, we suspect that deja vu is actually a kind of memory anomaly. And we know that this is likely because of the kinds of things that seem to elicit deja vu. Basically, there's kind of two groups here, by the way. One, I guess we could characterize as sort of a clinical group that's prone to experiencing deja vu. And these are folks who have like epilepsy or neurological disorders like this. They tend to experience instances of deja vu more often than people without epilepsy. So, right off the bat, that suggests that there's a natural cause for epilepsy. It suggests that, or a natural cause for deja vu, well, and for epilepsy. It suggests that when we experience deja vu, it has something to do with brain functionality when it comes to memory. When it comes to the non-clinical cases, there are a few different competing or perhaps complementary explanations of deja vu. Cleary, in a 2008 paper, actually suggests that recognition memory might be responsible for deja vu, or rather a sort of misfiring of recognition memory. Recognition memory is basically a function of memory that allows us to recognize that the memory that we are recalling is of an experience that happened to us, a memory of something that happened to me, right? Now, it's possible that under certain conditions, environmental, neurological, whatever, that recognition memory is triggered when it's not supposed to be. And this could create a sense of familiarity when you're in a new situation that you haven't experienced before. Could be a misfire of recognition memory that causes you to falsely perceive that you have experienced what you're experiencing before. Youngson has also suggested that deja vu could be a result of information that's been learned and forgotten, but that is still encoded somewhere in the brain. So we've lost our, sort of familiarity with that information, I suppose. Nonetheless, it can, I don't want to say return, because we're not talking about something Freudian here. But even though we've forgotten this information, it's still there and may somehow figure into, a sense of familiarity, a sense of having already been in a situation that is perhaps similar to the one that you have forgotten, but the information about which is still encoded in your brain. So that's one possible explanation. And there are other things we can keep in mind here too, right? People tend to experience deja vu more frequently as they get older. That's interesting. And people who travel more frequently or who watch a lot more films and television are more likely to experience deja vu. It suggests that perhaps somebody who's lived longer or who has seen a lot of movies and television or traveled a lot has just seen more stuff. And more new experiences are going to, from time to time, feel uncannily similar to previous experiences. And that would explain the sense of deja vu. There are other possible explanations, but the point is these are all naturalistic explanations for deja vu. They don't appeal to the paranormal or to precognition or to alternate realities or time travel, right? And it's possible that deja vu actually has multiple different causes, and that in some cases perhaps Cleary is right and it's misfiring of recognition memory. Youngson may be right about other cases where we've learned and forgotten, yet that information is still stored somewhere in the brain. So maybe deja vu has multiple causes and multiple complementary explanations will be needed to explain all of those. But the point is, which do you think is more plausible, right? Keeping in mind the principles of naturalism that I went over that are on slide number 5. Is it more plausible that, it's just a memory anomaly? Or is it more plausible that information can flow backward or forward through time or from another reality? Which is the simpler explanation? Similarly, when it comes to the Mandela Effect, we can just explain this in terms of false memory. And I know that might sound like a boring explanation. It's not as compelling as alternate realities, but it is definitely more plausible. And we know that human memory is fallible, right? Trauma can cause deficits in certain faculties of memory. You've probably heard of H.M., who had the memory of a goldfish, right? Couldn't recall anything from more than 30 seconds ago. Yet he could remember details from before his injury about his life. And he could learn new skills like the Tower of Hanoi, a children's puzzle. He could learn to do this in procedural memory, but he had no memory of learning to do it, right? So there are disorders of memory. There are things like false memory syndrome. So false memories, false memory syndrome is when, we have false memories, but they also figure heavily into our lives, in the sense that a false memory might inform how I think about myself and what I do, right? So that's false memory syndrome. We can implant false memories with hypnosis. This is one of the problems with using hypnosis for, say, recollecting alien abductions, right? Like Betty and Barney Hill. They recalled their alien abduction under hypnosis. The problem with that is that the hypnotist can unintentionally implant false memories while he has you under hypnosis. So we can also confabulate. Confabulate is when we kind of make up a story, make up a memory. Not consciously, but unconsciously. So, following hypnosis again, or intoxication, or trauma, there's all kinds of ways in which we can come up with a confabulation. Even when we recall our memories, the very act of recollecting something has been shown to slightly alter the memory that you're recalling, right? So memory, we think of as pretty trustworthy, but it's actually pretty unreliable. The Mandela Effect is probably explainable as a kind of false memory where many people confabulate or unconsciously concoct a similar false memory. And you can think of this by looking at some examples, right? Remember the Berenstein bears? Well, that's not a very common way to end a word, right? Stain. Usually we're much used to like Steen or Stein, which is spelled differently, So perhaps many people just misremembered the Berenstain Bears as being spelled the Berenstein Bears, because that's the more familiar way to end, a sort of proper name, Stein. Stein or Stein is just German for stone, by the way. So it's more common, it's more available, and that's why we misremember it that way. The Fruit of the Loom logo is another one. The underwear company, Fruit of the Loom. Many people will report that they remember there being a cornucopia, a horn of plenty, like you see at Thanksgiving. They believe there's a cornucopia in this label. There is not, and you can go and check this. It's just a bunch of fruit arranged nicely. But it's fairly common to see fruit arranged like this coming out of a cornucopia, right? So people probably just collectively misremembered because of the availability of that imagery, which they may have seen somewhere else at some other point in time, of a cornucopia full of fruit, right? And of course, when it comes to my favorite example of Shazam, well, Shazam, although it wasn't a real movie, Sinbad did play Sinbad the Sailor on television. He looked, I guess he was dressed a little bit like a genie. And, Shazam sounds like Kazam, which was the real movie, and they both starred like famous African-American male actors, so maybe there was a bit of confabulation there, and people misremembered Kazam as Shazam, right? So, easily explained that way. And again, I've got to reiterate that this kind of false memory confabulation need not be conscious. It's not like people are making this up consciously. This is just how fallible memory is, that our brains can make mistakes of this kind. And because we all have a lot of the same information at hand concerning these memories, the similarity of imagery of the Fruit of the Loom logo and a cornucopia full of fruit maybe causes us to get things mixed up and misremember things, right? It's a naturalistic explanation that seems to me much more plausible than alternate realities or time shifting or reality shifting or anything like that. And remember, there is a kind of circularity to all of this, which is why I think that these alternate reality explanations are not as plausible as natural explanations. If the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is true, then these alternate realities, it would still count as a naturalistic explanation, but the point is we cannot really know if this interpretation is the right one, if the many worlds interpretation is the right one. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there's a bit of circularity here too in terms of how these phenomena are explained. The Mandela Effect and Deja Vu might be used as evidence for alternate realities, and then alternate realities, quantum mechanics, many world interpretations might be used as evidence for a sort of reality shifting interpretation of the Mandela Effect. So it's a little circular. So, but the bottom line is, even if there were alternate realities, how would we know? It does not seem like we could know. So in the meantime, we have to apply the principles of naturalism and go with the simplest explanation that produces empirically testable hypotheses, that has the right kinds of evidence, and so on and so forth. It gets us from mere belief to knowledge. So again, the point with these lectures was to sort of show you how to think about the subject matter of your final paper, but using the subject matter of the special topics. Last time it was supernatural beings. This time it was alternate realities, reality shifting, and things like deja vu and the Mandela Effect. I want to say that this has been an incredibly fun class to teach, and I'm sorry that I've fallen slightly behind with my delivery schedule and with the feedback. It has been a very hectic time for me, as I understand it has been for a lot of you. But nonetheless, I had a lot of fun teaching this class, and I hope that you all had a lot of fun taking this class. And if you have any questions before you submit your final papers, please do let me know. Otherwise, I've just had a blast. And I hope as we get back to normal in the fall and we start having in-person classes again, I hope that I'll see some of you in some of my other classes. I think it would be nice. Be cool to teach a class in person again for the first time in over a year. That's going to be fun. Anyway, thank you all. This has been absolutely amazing. This is the second time I've taught this class, and I had fun. Even though it was pretty difficult to do, it was very challenging, but I had fun nonetheless. So, that is all. Please speak to me if you have any questions, but I'll see you all next time. Maybe in another future class of mine. Bye for now, everyone.